Hey, this is Brookes. I've got some time, I've got an idea, and I've got a cup of coffee. So let's forge a character. This week's character is one I've taken to calling Jonadab, which is a very old-timey name for a very, very old-timey guy. What you see me doing here first is laying down some really rough sketches of the character. Now, my idea for moving through this character, or my initial jumping off point for his design, was to think about the things that I was really passionate or excited about when I was a little kid, when I was around age 10. Now, my reason for doing this is, I don't know if it's the case for everyone, but for me especially, when I think about those things or incorporating those things into art or design, it almost feels regressive, and that somehow doing the opposite, or the thing that you're not prone to do, is somehow making a step forward or making progress. And honestly, I don't think that's the best way to look at it. Because those things that excited us as kids are still in there, and in a way they're sort of the most authentic or truthful part of our interests. We may have changed a lot since then, but those things are still there. So one of these elements that I included was the large, oversized ears, like the kind you'd find on a fennec fox, which was a favorite animal of mine at age 10. As I sketch out and realize the character and do that gesture drawing that will be the final pose for the illustration, you'll see a mix between something old, or something natural, and something new, or something technological. Now that's an idea or motif that's always interested me, especially as a kid, and I think it's something that Star Wars strikes a balance of really well. Just encapsulating that idea is the lightsaber. There's a natural crystal in the middle with a technological housing around it. Another big inspiration for me around this age was the character Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, and I think that's a pretty common influence for a lot of people involved in art and character design, especially in my generation. And it's pretty funny because Stitch is a go-to reference for a lot of people's comments that I'll tend to see, not just under my art, but a lot of people's art. In fact, I saw recently someone comparing a drawing of BB-8 to Stitch, saying it reminds me of Stitch. It's a fairly common comparison to make. One really funny one, though, is anytime I will post a version or an illustration of a koala character that I've made, people will make that comment. They'll say, "This reminds me of Stitch," which is pretty funny considering that when they were developing the design for Stitch, that was one of their biggest influences in the final design, was that of the koala. So I always find that comparison kind of funny. It's actually the inverse. It's koalas who inspired Stitch in the first place. As I was concepting and working on this character, I decided to name him Jonadab, and his story is that he is a centuries or even millenniums old character who's a tinkerer, who enjoys creating life out of robots. And I decided to juxtapose this idea of a very old and folksy, natural-looking character with a very young and new robot that's perched on his arm. So that bird robot is egg-shaped. The sort of white or ivory exterior then leads to an eye socket that's orange and yellow, the way that an egg yolk is. And that's just an attempt of mine to contrast the old and the young. You'll see me blocking in the silhouette of the character with the base color, and then adding on top of that, locking the layer and adding each of the color details over top of that. Now for the final part of this illustration, I'm going to switch you over into the time-lapse recording that's done in Procreate. And the reason for that is this camera setup, the overhead setup, turning the brightness on the iPad down a little bit so that the color balance works out well. I can draw just fine, sort of at that angle, but then the finite or final color and shading choices, I had to really balance and figure out looking at the screen directly at an appropriate level of brightness to really understand all of the color details. I duplicated the layer and darkened it to cut in and add sort of some contour and light shapes, and then added things like some glow, some overall darkness and shadow, some soft shadow with the multiply layer, and some rim lighting as well. So I'm never going to stop making those traditional character design forge videos, the ones that are meant to educate you and help you with your art and story and design, and especially character design. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say, because this kind of video is really fun for me to make. And if we hit that 50,000 subscriber mark, the one that we're hovering around pretty soon, I would love to make my gift to you for hitting that 2 videos a week. One of these and one of those traditional character design forge videos, and that excludes episodes of Character Select as well. So please let me know if that's something you guys would like to see. Overall, I'm pretty happy with my buddy Jonadab here. I'm looking forward to doing more passes on him in the future and sort of refining down the design. I'm making the high-resolution, layered, working file for this character, either the Photoshop or Procreate file, whichever one you prefer. I'm making that this month's gift to Novice Bard tier patrons on Patreon and higher. And that's the tier that I've recently introduced that allows you to get a personalized video critiquing your work from me, at least 5 minutes in length. That's been a lot of fun to make, and if you're interested in improving, getting the steps and goals in mind of what you need to work toward next, and support this channel in return as well, head over to patreon.com/bageldenizen. Thanks so much for watching, and have fun creating.